People will go and call this propaganda. Or it's not true. Okay? I'm sorry, but you debunk your own argument. Misinformation, disinformation laws. When this has been circulating for 10 months now. You can't just claim misinformation, disinformation when it suits you and not when it doesn't. Trigger warning, people. You better find out who the evil are. The real evil. I mean, evil. Watch it. Watch it with your kids. Watch it with everybody. Why? You need to wake the fuck up.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of videos of beheaded Palestinian babies and children, Palestinian children with severed limbs, killed by Israel. And not a single corporate media outlet has reported on how Israel has systematically beheaded Palestinian children on a daily basis for the last 15 months. And yet every single one of these Western media outlets was so quick to spread the mass atrocity propaganda in order to manufacture consent for Israel's genocide by repeating a story about an incident which never took place.
We have some really disturbing new information out of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated.
I choked up earlier reading this new revelation about 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded. And I was like, how can any human being do that to a baby?
So what message does that send? That mythical beheaded babies, because they were Israeli, are to be reported on when the incident never happened, but that Palestinian babies and children, when they're beheaded and their limbs are severed and they're found hanging from trees with half of their body missing, that they are not worth the coverage to report on their experience, on their premature death at the hands of Israel and the United States. Did you know that Israeli occupation forces tied explosives to the body of an 80-year-old Palestinian man who was forced to clear booby-trapped houses, and once they released him, they shot and killed him and his wife? Did you know that Israeli soldiers were captured on film raping a Palestinian hostage? And when news of this came to light, Israeli far-right politicians and soldiers and ordinary people protested outside of the facility where the soldier was being held, demanding that he be released. And in parallel, the Israeli Knesset engaged in debates on the right of Israeli soldiers to rape Palestinian hostages.
תרלול הזה, שיש מי שבפרקליטות חושב שאפשר לבוא ולעצור חיילים על דברים שעושים למחבלי נוח'בה, לא נגמר. אנחנו לא יכולים להמשיך כרגיל.
להכניס מקל לרקטום של בן אדם, זה לגיטימי?
כן, אם הוא נוח'בה, הכל לגיטימי לעשות.
אוקיי.
הכל. הכל.
One of the soldiers who was involved in the rape had a media tour all around Israeli media stations and took off his ski mask and was revered as a national hero by members of Israeli society. Did you know that a young Palestinian boy by the name of Saddam Rajab was killed in the occupied West Bank after an Israeli occupation soldier shot him in the stomach? Even though the evidence is right there, it was still responded to by supporters of Israel as being fake or being what they call Hollywood. Because not only does Israel kill Palestinians with impunity, but Israel's supporters, to believe that their ideology is morally justified, when they do see images of Israel's policies against Palestinians, they just claim that they're fake, that they didn't happen, that they're made up entirely by Palestinians to claim global sympathy. Did you know that Israeli occupation forces recently killed a 2-year-old Palestinian girl by the name of Leila al-Khatib, who was sitting down to eat dinner with her family in occupied Jenin. She was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. Not only did the Israeli sniper shoot her, but then the Israeli occupation forces prevented her and her family from rushing to get medical care, and she died. This, of course, is not an aberration. This happens all the time on a daily basis. Prior to October 7th, 2022 had been the deadliest year for Palestinian children killed by Israeli occupation forces in the occupied West Bank in 15 years. But did you even know about it? Did you know that in 16 months of genocide in Gaza, Israel has managed to halve the life expectancy in Gaza? If that isn't proof of genocide, I don't know what could be proof of genocide. Did you know that Israel withholds Palestinian bodies and prevents Palestinians that it killed from being returned to their families? Over 600 Palestinian bodies are being illegally held by Israel, some since the 1960s. Did you know that if you go on Google Maps and you look for satellite images of Beit Hanun, you will see that Israel has completely destroyed and erased that village in Gaza, that city in Gaza, and instead replaced all of the buildings, the stores, the homes, the parks, the schools, the mosques, the churches, with thick mud embedded with Israeli tank marks in the shape of a Star of David. Not a single corporate mainstream media outlet covered that story, thought it would be important. Consider, for example, as part of Israel's genocide, Israel has destroyed the overwhelming majority of all the infrastructure that is related to the provision of basic services like electricity, like water, like sanitation. It destroyed 90% of the housing units in Gaza. 90%. If that isn't genocide, I don't know what is. You can't possibly make the argument that the destruction of the majority, the overwhelming majority of all housing units in Gaza does not constitute intent to destroy a people in whole or in part. If you continue to get your information from mainstream media, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't know any of these stories. But I think we should understand that if any one of these incidents had happened to an Israeli child or an Israeli family, then not only would the media be all over the story, politicians would be condemning it in the strongest possible terms, there would be widespread coverage and discussion about the horrors that that individual had endured. But when violence is carried out against Palestinians systematically in much wider proportions over 76 years, it is something that the global north wants us to accept as a reality, as a status quo, as the default. And
did you know that the Israeli secret intelligence agency by the name of Mossad works hand in hand with the CIA to create false flag operations around the world? Did you know that Israel, nation state of Israel, poses to be other Arab nations, peoples, poses to be Muslims, and effectively commit their own atrocities against themselves and then blame the Arab nations? Yeah, that's a thing. How would you know the difference? How many Arab languages can you speak?
And as a result, evil is allowed to prevail with absolute impunity. After 15 months of a daily live stream genocide, we're really at a very critical turning point. Either the global community decides that international law is to mean something and is to actually be applied consistently to all offenders, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, no matter the circumstances, or we decide to throw it away entirely. I don't see a middle ground because the Gaza genocide has exposed the double standards and the hypocrisy that is so embedded into the system. If you take the example of the ICC warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, you've had states in Europe come out and say they're just not going to honor the warrants. Netanyahu and Gallant will be allowed to visit their states in total impunity, and that they won't comply with the obligation to actually arrest them and hand them over to The Hague. That's their obligation as signatories to the Rome Statute, the treaty that establishes the International Criminal Court. And in retaliation for the issuance of the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed in Gaza, the US, under the Trump administration, has sanctioned the International Criminal Court. That should make everyone stop to pause and reflect on who the good guys are in this and who might the bad guys be. The world that we're creating, if we continue to ignore international law, is a very dangerous world. It's a world where states' conduct is not bound by any notions of law or morality. It's a world where the only principle is if I can get away with it, then I will do it. It's a world that is going to, in many ways, resemble much of the death and destruction and killing that we saw at the height of empire hundreds of years ago. But also, it's a world that's going to be much more dangerous even than that, because of the ability now to accelerate and to automate killing and destruction through the technologies of today that we didn't have back then. Every single crime that they get away with is merely a precursor for a more egregious crime in the future. And the only thing that can stop that pattern from continuing is accountability. That's why it's so important for people all around the world to demand that policymakers and governments comply with their obligations under international law. And in this current moment, that means allowing for the reconstruction of Gaza by Palestinians for Palestinians without the interference or the meddling of the West. And international law requires that Israel unconditionally and immediately withdraw from the occupied Palestinian territories. The Gaza Strip, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, there is no debate. There is widespread consensus, and this was affirmed most recently by the International Court of Justice in its July 2024 advisory opinion, where the court held that Israel's existence in the occupied Palestinian territories is illegal. Israel's existence is illegal. That means that if Israeli soldiers were to plant flowers in Gaza, that act would be illegal because they have no right to be there in the first place. It's Palestinian land. The court went so far as to say that Israel's conduct in the occupied Palestinian territories violates a number of peremptory norms under international law. These are norms of the highest order from which no derogation is possible. They're the most serious violations of international law. Violations like the prohibition on apartheid, against racial discrimination, against violating self-determination of Palestinians, against the acquisition of territory by force. The court found that Israel was engaged in all of these extremely serious breaches towards the Palestinians, and that the only solution is an immediate and unconditional withdrawal of Israeli forces from Palestinian land. Now, when you compare that, which is what Israel's obligations are under international law, with the public discourse in the West, you see how far we are from adopting a policy that is compliant with the law. So this is really important. Israel must leave Palestinian land and has no legal claim to it whatsoever. Not to build settlements there, not to extract wealth from Palestinian land through the theft of resources like Palestinian gas off the coast of Gaza, not to take our water, not to do anything there. It has no right to be there, period. It's so essential in this moment to support independent media outlets, which are oftentimes the only source of amplifying Palestinian voices and supporting truth and justice. Support independent media, support Double Down News on Patreon. And if you'd like
This fucking idiot. For like a tour. Sorry, this guy challenged the shield. Works for Shield Corp.
Because there are a lot of people in the territory that Israel controls today, particularly in the West Bank, who, through genetic testing, we can know their families have been here for thousands of years. We don't know whether they practiced Judaism, whether they were Samaritans, pre-Islam. We don't know that. A lot of them we know have been Christians for 2,000 years. They have less of a right to the land than someone whose ancestors, the only thing we know about them is they lived in Latvia or Poland. They're Eastern European. How does that work? They're Jewish.
You know, in Israel, that you're not allowed to get a DNA test to track your genealogy without a court order. Now, this is from the Jerusalem Post. Want to fully understand your family genealogy? Not without a court order. According to some ancestry websites, there are indicators to tell you if you possess Jewish DNA or not, but you need a court order. And why is that? Because they don't want people to know that the Jews who live in Israel aren't from there. They're not Semitic. You know who is Semitic? The Palestinians. And so Tucker Carlson was interviewing Mike Huckabee, the United States ambassador to Israel, although it sounds like he's representing Israel and not the United States at all. He's 100% traitor to the United States. He is there representing the interests of Israel. And so he tries to find out, like, well, who, if you're using the Bible and God promised the Jews, how do we know Benjamin Netanyahu is one of those Jews? How do we know he comes from, his ancestors come from there? How do we know they don't come from Russia or Ukraine or anywhere else? So let's listen.
In the entirety of the world, there are about 16 million Jews total. And 8 million of them live here. The rest live mostly in New York or South Florida and a few other places. Okay. So this is a small population of people.
And you know how tough it is for the Jews in South Florida and New York. You know how tough it is.
Yeah.
They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in New York or South Florida.
Oh, I caught something.
Or Hollywood. They don't feel safe. I've heard this. They don't feel safe. Really? You don't feel. Of course they feel safe. Of course they do. Here we go. You know what makes them not feel safe? When Israel, in the name of Judaism, does a genocide in 4K right in front of everyone's eyes. Then that causes a lot of anti-Semitism because the people doing the genociding conflate Judaism with Zionism and Israel. And they don't have anything to do with each other.
And they're hoping, they have something to do with each other, but they're hoping that there will be more anti-Semitism as a result of their evil, because the Jews want nothing to do with it. They want to force them to all be on their side. And what better way than to put their backs up against a wall where you do so much evil, people just start blaming everyone who looks like you, so we
Right.
both throw in together.
So it makes their theory is to make all the Jews of the world unite together because the world is against them because they've done a genocide in front of everyone's face, and now people are against them because they've conflated Judaism and Jews everywhere with Israel. That used to be called anti-Semitic to do that. If you conflated Jews everywhere with Israel, that used to be considered anti-Semitic. But now the Zionists in Israel are doing it themselves to conflate that. Okay, so let's get back to this. Here we go.
In the entirety of the world, there are about 16 million Jews total, and 8 million of them live here. The rest live mostly in New York or South Florida, and a few other places.
Okay.
So this is a small population of people. They have connection to this land, historically, biblically.
Do they?
Yes, they do.
If Bibi's family, we know they lived in Eastern Europe. There's no evidence they ever lived here. He's not religious.
But
In what sense do
ancestrally,
you have his family tree? No, we don't.
Do you?
He doesn't. So no one does. That's the point.
But
So how do we know that?
So how could be? Do you have his family tree? And nobody has his family tree. No one. He doesn't have it. I don't have it. You don't have it. There's no Benjamin Netanyahu family tree because his last name is Milkowski.
All we can say for sure is he didn't come from that region of the
Well,
world.
all we know is for sure
is
that he's not from the region in Israel.
Is
If
he
they are
connected
Jewish,
at all?
and if there has been a practice of Judaism and a connection to the language, the
And he
Bible,
doesn't-
the land,
His ancestors didn't. He doesn't practice Judaism in any rigorous way. His ancestors didn't live here. They didn't speak the language, and there's no evidence they ever lived here. So on what basis does he have a right to
very
be
much.
here?
So there's Mike Huckabee, the United States ambassador to Israel, again, not representing the United States, representing Zionist Israel, saying that, well, he's considered a Jew from this region because he practices the religion, he speaks the language. First of all, no, he doesn't practice the religion, and B, they didn't speak the language. His grandparents didn't speak the language, his parents didn't speak the language. Okay. So let's get back to this. Here we go.
it's the language. He has fought for the land. His family has fought for the
We're
land.
dodging a
No, I'm not
very
dodging
obvious
that.
question, which is where does this right come from? And the
I'm-
reason
I'm
it's
giving
meaningful.
you that.
So he's asking, where does the right of Jews to have land in Israel? Where does it come from? And how do you know who the Jews are that was promised to? Who has this right to that land?
Because there are a lot of people in the territory that Israel controls today, particularly in the West Bank, who, through genetic testing, we can know their families have been here for thousands of years. We don't know whether they practiced Judaism, whether they were Samaritans, pre-Islam. We don't know that. A lot of them we know have been Christians for 2,000 years. They have less of a right to the land than someone whose ancestors, the only thing we know about them is they lived in Latvia or Poland. They're Eastern European. How does that work?
They're Jewish.
By what definition?
Greg, we need to talk.
No time. That sales call is to summarize.
You really need to switch to Monday CRM. It has built-in AI that...
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. So the people who actually have a DNA that connects them to that land, they happen to be Christian or Muslim or something else, they have less of a right to it than someone like Benjamin Netanyahu, who has no connection to that land, who comes from Eastern Europe. His family comes from Eastern Europe. He comes from Eastern Europe.
Semitic is a language.
Okay. Whether you're religious or not, the argument's religious, correct? Well, based in Scripture, Genesis. Read Genesis chapter 11, 12. Just get going. Go right through to the end of Revelation. If you want to know who Abraham is, if you want to know who Israel is, it's Jacob. It's not a land, it's a man. And there were 12 tribes of Jacob. What we have is a bunch of Eastern Europeans occupying the land of Canaan.
Language grouping, which means they have even less right to it because those were Yiddish speakers, and they say they brought back a dead language, which is such a lie. Everybody spoke Aramaic. They made like some reconstructed Hebrew to apartheid everybody.
Yes.
That's why they did that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So let's get back to this.
They're Jewish.
By what definition?
They're Jewish by their
But how do we know they have any
ethnicity.
connection
They're
to the
Jewish by
Jews
their
of the,
faith. They're
of the
Jewish
Bible?
by the connection to the language. Jewish by the connection to the Torah.
But how do we know that specifically Bibi's ancestors ever lived here? How do we know that?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
How do we know if the Prime Minister of Israel's ancestors ever lived?
Maybe I could ask you, how do we know they didn't? I mean,
Well, it's on the basis of the claim that they did that all kinds of things happen. People are displaced. There's a money flow. I mean, it's a big question. A lot hangs on this. It's not some theoretical thing like,
So how do you know they didn't? Well,
it's the one thing we know.
It's the one thing we know is that they didn't. That they came from not the Middle East. That's the one thing we know. And, by the way, the reason why Tucker's bringing it up is because Benjamin Netanyahu and the Zionists used it as a right for them to live there and have that land. So now the burden's on you to prove that he's from there.
The people you pushed out already live there, so I know they're from there.
What's that?
The people they pushed out were already there, so I know they're from there.
Yeah, yes.
Wilkowski.
My grandparents do this or do that. It's like, no, we have a right to be here because my ancestors were here. Okay, how do we know they were here?
I'm totally unable to process what you're trying to get at.
He probably is. He's a real dipshit. Yeah, well, look, this is your country, everybody. And they've been saying this shit since the 80s, okay? The propaganda of America and Israel and Christian, Judeo-Christian, people still say that. That is not a thing. It's never been a thing. It's completely a marketing term.
Absolutely,
it's a nonsense term. Semitism, by the way, Semitic is a language grouping. It's not genetic, so they have even less right based on that. Arabs are Semites.
Indigenous Israel prime ministers and their real origins. So, Benjamin Netanyahu, he's from Poland.
Oh, who could have seen that come?
Yair Lapid, he's from Hungary. Naftali Bennett, he's from, can't tell what that
Polish.
is.
Same flag.
He's Polish.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's Poland? Poland is part of the Germanic nations. Deutschland. Deutschland, whatever you call it. Where's Hitler from? Poland.
Ehud Olmert, he's Russian. Ariel Sharon, Polish. Ehud Barak, Lithuanian. Shimon Peres from Belarus. Yitzhak Rabin from Ukraine. Yitzhak Samir, Belarus. Golda Meir, Ukraine. Yiga Alyan, Belarus. And David Ben Gurion, Polish. None of them are from there. Isn't that interesting?
Some good Polish jokes now, but they're all anti-Semitic.
You know, if you watch all those Netflix and Amazon films where the bad guy is the Eastern Mafia, they aren't fighting with Liam Neeson. They all ended up here.
Yeah, especially Ukrainian ones. People think that's Russian Mafia, but those are Ukrainian Jewish Mafia. It's a
war, isn't it? State of Israel is born, Palestine Post. The Jewish state born. Now, no, I've done this heaps of times. Because you just aren't getting it. Israel is accepted as a member of the United Nations. Who created it? Who created it? The United Nations. See all that green? That's Israel. Okay. Have the river to the sea. Did you get it? The river to the sea. There's the sea. It all belongs to the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, which is the 12 tribes of Jacob. That is Canaan, occupied by a nation-state of Israel, not the tribes of Israel. It's the Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi. For crying out loud. And they're not even Jewish, as you can see there. They're Eastern European. In 1948, that nation was created by the United Nations. There is no United Nations solution to this without taking down the United Nations. The United Nations created it. Learn your damn history. Learn your Bible if you want to understand the conflict. Without understanding the two of them, you got nothing.